The president's plan is to better target the trafficking of illegal weapons into cities like Baltimore, with the hope of finding and arresting the most violent trigger pullers. But experts say it's a plan we've heard before, and so far hasn't worked. It's the tale of the tape in the city of Baltimore, outlining perimeters of violence and bloodshed across this city, where bodies are measured in bullets. Victims of an epidemic of gun violence, where those pulling the trigger don't fear legal consequences.
Are people feeling more emboldened to use a gun and go shoot a person now than they were 3, 4, 5 years ago? The answer is yes. And that's the problem.
Jason Johnson is an Operation Crime and Justice contributor who believes the current pace of violence the city of Baltimore is seeing is a direct result of crimes lacking consequences.
There's no way around it. You can't reduce crime without going after those people and holding them accountable.
But last month, the federal government announced a plan that would hopefully do just that.
It's an outrage. It has to end, and we'll end it.
President Joe Biden meeting with Mayor Brandon Scott and the leaders of several other cities, promising a partnership the federal government believes would help stop the illegal flow of weapons into Baltimore, preventing them from getting into the hands of those using them to kill.
Mayor Scott says that 80% of the guns in Baltimore were acquired outside the city. There's little he can do about that. So we have to act.
I think that we have to understand that it's not being soft or tough on crime. We have to be smart on crime. We have to do the things that we know work.
But some are skeptical of how well it could work, especially since Baltimore already has some of the strictest gun laws in the country.
I'm going to say it's going to have virtually zero impact because it misses the point.
Johnson believes the president's plan is missing the human element of actually finding those driving the violence and putting them behind bars.
So the president's plan is very long on gun control type rhetoric and very little, if not really non-existent, any talk of holding individuals accountable who actually are using guns to harm people.
While it wasn't included in the president's plan, there is a federal program that does work to hold gun offenders more accountable.
Gun violence in Baltimore, totally unacceptable.
It's called Project Exile and saw a small expansion here in Baltimore this year.
To prosecute illegal firearms here in Baltimore.
The initiative transfers certain gun cases from state to federal court, where penalties are usually stiffer.
And it takes collaboration.
And while City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby seems to be on board, a recent study from the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund shows since she's been in office, there's been a 42% decrease in mandatory minimum sentences handed down for gun felonies.
They intentionally engaged in ABA pleas to avoid the mandatory minimums, which runs completely contrary to the purpose of Project Exile.
A disconnect that could lead to even fewer consequences as the federal government's plan moves forward, which experts say, despite more funding for community intervention programs, may not lead to the change this city needs.
Do we want people to, in all manner, to find other avenues in life? Absolutely, 100%. But if they don't do that, we want to hold them accountable. So that's the bottom line.
Last year, 73 gun possession cases were charged under Project Exile. That's the most since the program was created here in Baltimore. And while there was an expansion of the initiative this year, experts say it could be expanded even further if there was more of a commitment and investment from the president himself. Dan Lamparello, Fox 45 News.
All right, now do one that says